Welcome to Sparks by PRCA, a podcast series channel. This episode is part of the podcast series special, Mindful Communicators, Promoting Mental Resilience.
Hi, my name is Patrick Melville. I'm a mental health expert, and I'm so pleased to collaborate with PRCA, running this podcast series about building mental resilience. Everyone and every organization is different, and I'm so pleased to have a senior member in the industry in a large agency to join and speak today. Welcome, Jonathan Curtis, MD at Grayling, UK.
Hi, what an introduction. Thank you.
So we're going to run through a discussion based on some specific questions. The first one I'd like to ask you is, why do you think this program is important for the industry?
I think awareness is probably the first kind of challenge, being able to speak about these things and allowing people to feel comfortable speaking about this topic, and people in the industry realizing that the industry is there to support and can support. So I think from an awareness point of view more generally, but also, I'm hoping that by speaking to you and to listening to these other podcasts, that I can get kind of practical solutions, practical experiences that I can take to colleagues to try and support them across the agency. I think actually there are so many good things that are happening across our industry and other industries, and I think that's really important too. I'm not a mental health practitioner or an expert, and I am here to listen to other people as much as I am to give advice of the things that we do from an agency point of view in a large agency. But I think we all need to group together as an industry to share our tips, our tricks, and support each other. This isn't an issue where we should be competing. It's one where we need to kind of come together. So I think it's really important, and I'm very grateful to be able to be on the podcast and listen to the podcast as well.
Thank you so much. You're exactly right. It's interesting how through these conversations with people that we just hear everyone has their own unique purpose, but at the same time, there are so many similarities.
Yeah.
It'll be lovely to know from you, what do you think have been the main stress drivers that your staff have experienced over the last, let's say, few months stroke to the beginning of the year?
It's a good question. I think as looking at it from a kind of macro point of view, COVID is kind of, over. We were all expecting 2023 to be, the new beginning after kind of 2021, 2022, which were, slightly grim because of those reasons. I guess it's not really the end to the misery. Cost of living, the news is not full of lovely things, unfortunately, and the industry has suffered probably more than it had suffered during COVID. There are unfortunately stories of agencies making redundancies. There are a couple of agencies that have gone under. Clients are wanting kind of more for less. And I think from an agency background, there are those pressures. And so I think we're all feeling that pressure, and that pressure, in down times and times when, you're not kind of, you've got that huge kind of success, it's very hard to breed that enthusiasm across the agency. So I think building that resilience has been more of a struggle this year than I've found in any other year. I think, though, what I would say is mental health is generally kind of individual. What causes my mental health to drop is very different to that of my colleagues, maybe. There are 185 colleagues across Grayling UK, and we need to be receptive to all of their issues and try to support them, whatever that may be. And they are very, very different issues. Work has particularly accentuated stress, but a lot of the cases that we found are driven by kind of personal situations. So I think as an agency and from a work point of view, we need to do more to support people and ensure that we have the right structures in place. But lives are really complicated.
Yes.
People's lives are really difficult. There are so many things going on. Unfortunately, every day I hear of colleagues that have a different struggle from a personal reason, because we all have lives and we all have things outside of work. And I think it's more important than ever that the agency is there to support, but also we can give people tips and tricks and other things to support them in, the rest of their lives.
Yes.
The more important bit outside of work.
Yeah. Well, I've seen that as well. The fact that you can't draw a line between setting your clock when you're doing work and going home. There's a fact that when you are stressed, sometimes something that will stress you in the evening, a tiny thing, could really be driven by something in the day. Yes. And of course, that's the straw that breaks the camel's back And it's lovely to know what, how just the agency, is looking to at least recognize that.
Yeah.
And you say the stresses has been issues at work or at home. Have you found any specific ones, maybe based on the culture or the bigger?
I think, I think, as I said, from a home is more complicated, and there are so many things going on in life. And, as I said, mentioned things like cost of living. I think from a work point of view, agency leaders, and I'll be honest, when times are tougher, it's harder to recruit quickly. You're looking at things a little bit more cautiously. And sometimes, you've got to be really conscious of making sure that you're investing at the right times, even through downturns, and so that you're not putting even more pressure on, colleagues who are picking up work. And, and I've noticed, this year particularly, it's been harder to recruit. So therefore, there's more of a burden on people kind of shouldering that work until we have managed to make those hires. And we as an agency need to make sure that we're making the right choices, but then we've also got the structure and the awareness. And I think there's lots that we can do from an agency point of view to kind of put that into kind of process and action. I can kind of go through some of that if that's helpful.
Well, thank you. I mean, exactly that. I think the purpose of even this series is not to focus on the problems. It's, your classic pitch to a client. It's a case of, what are the methods that have been used to, and again, theme is build the mental resilience with your colleagues and staff.
And I can go through some of the things that we do. I mean, I will stress we are only as good as the support and advice that we get from people teams. We do a lot of work with the likes of Mind and looking at their kind of mental health action plans and things like that. So I think the first thing is realize that this is not an area where PR professionals or are the experts, right? So get support. But I think the first thing I would talk about is the culture, because I think sometimes when we talk about what can we do to support mental health, we go straight into action, right? And actually there's a macro point here, which is the culture. Culture creates enthusiasm. It invigorates people. It gives them a kind of belonging, a desire. And most importantly, I think a strong culture gives people the kind of freedom and confidence to open up and discuss their issues. I've worked places where I wouldn't dare talk about weakness or how I'm feeling, but that's changed. And I think the first thing is building a strong and supportive kind of culture from a macro point of view. I like to look at it from a kind of the awareness point of view, the prevention, and then kind of the action and the kind of the follow-on. I think from an awareness point of view, once you've built that culture piece, and I think, that is about making sure that it's led from the top. I try to do that. I hope I do that. And that, I am involved as much as anyone else, and people realize that if I'm, at the training session, then they have to. This is a compulsory. This isn't, we want everyone to learn these kind of tips and tricks and raise the awareness so that every single member of staff, even if they don't think it's important to them, they should know and understand, because at some point they may be affected. And I've had this before where somebody from, our HR team is fantastic. So maybe you could go and talk about, your own mental health and your own story, and you kind of go, oh, I don't know what to, but there are other ways of doing it. And I think leaders showing, and this is kind of a bit antithesis of what you're supposed to do in some senses, but showing fragility is quite important. I mean, I remember once, very, very sadly, probably the hardest thing I had to deal with from an agency point of view, we had a member of staff who very, very sadly died. And I had to turn around and tell the agency this. And this was someone that I'd worked with for years and, couldn't have more respect for, and and it was a shock for me. And I stood up in front of 180 people or whatever it was and told them this shocking news. And I told them with tears running down my face, and I remember thinking in that moment, oh, you idiot, kind of, come on, you shouldn't be crying, right? And I look back at it and I actually think that was probably one of the kind of, the best things I could have done is shown people, because the amount of people that then came out to me and said, God, I feel, this has really affected me, and I saw it affected you. It built that kind of feeling, and I didn't mean, there wasn't a purpose behind it. It just happened, but it allowed people to go, okay, he finds this really tough. We find this really tough. That's okay to talk about it. So I think that's really important. Then I think there's more general kind of awareness, which is around, training, There's a fantastic training that we had called David Beanie. I'm sure, Patrick, you do fantastic things as well. Celebrating kind of, mental health days that there are, making sure that, everyone is aware of mental health first aiders that you might have in the business. I know we've got a number of people, making sure they're kind of vocal, just making it feel like this is a place where it's okay to talk about these things and you're sharing the right information. Then we put a lot of focus on prevention. I can be a bit of a data geek sometimes. So I think once you kind of looked at the awareness piece, so we look at things like timesheet data, who is repeatedly burning the midnight oil? Why are they? Are they on too many clients? Is there an issue here? Do we need to, kind of look out for them? Even holiday data, we try and encourage, have people taken their holidays? You can't, I don't want to say to somebody, you must go on holiday. But if I realize that someone hasn't been on holiday for 6 months or taken a day off work, it's a flag that they're maybe at risk of burnout, sickness data even, are people taking too much sick, whatever it might be. Regular kind of, there are data points, but then there are also, obvious things. And none of these things cost money. This isn't about budget, I don't think. There are some things where there's a need for a budget, but not here. Regular check-ins, but I don't mean regular check-ins where we have a line manager catch up and we talk about a few things and then you go, oh, by the way, how are you? Take people out of the office, go for a walk, how are they? I remember we had training once and there was a kind of tip that they used, which was, if you have a weekly Monday meeting, ask people to kind of rate how they're feeling out of 10, right? Because you get a judge of, I may always be a 7, but then if I start to be a 5 and a 4, you realize that there's a problem. I might always be a 6 and I might drop to a 5 and there's no issue, but you start to understand what people's base levels are and you can just kind of look out for that. And then I think, then I think we go into kind of communication, which is making sure that there is a safe space for discussion. And that, it might be HR drop-in sessions, that might be having an EAP, the mental health first aiders that I talk about. And then I think finally where budgets are important, and frankly, nothing is more important than this. So, is the action piece, make sure you've got occupational health, make sure that you can take people off their workload, give them a break, and you've got a clear kind of action plan. And, frankly, if you need to pay for outside support, you need to pay for outside support. Profits, are irrelevant with these things.
But that's interesting how what the story from what you're saying from when you were talking about to your staff, the word that comes to mind is sort of language and mental health. Even those phrases are so new, and there's a balance between preventing, which I like what you're saying, working that way to find out what the drivers are, but also in a language everyone can communicate, like EAP and all that stuff. But also the other side, which I really admire, is the honesty. The word honesty is actually a key word which comes out in mental health. It's like, we don't all have the answers for ourselves, let alone our colleagues. And it's being honest as well, which really drives a lot of help and a lot of sort of support that people aren't perfect. We work in an industry where we have to hit those high numbers, have to be perfect as well. And of course, that data that you're looking at sounds a really good way just to try and see, it's not going to be 100% of 100%.
No, and looking at data isn't the answer, but it's just, and I think, as I kind of chair the PRCA mental health group, that we're working at various things. And, we all sit around and we talk about this and we say, we can't make up solutions. I can have ideas, but there are trained professionals and you need to, going back to the kind of budget point, there are so many things you don't need to pay for, but there are some things where you do need to pay for. And I think the other thing I would say is, and this probably ties into the cultural point, is don't forget the small things, the thank yous. We had yesterday, we had puppies in the office, and just the little things like that just perk people up are just so important. And I think that don't forget the little things and the thank you.
Exactly right. And also what the word also comes to mind is control. When you can do little things, you have more control, to build that lovely resilience. And of course, just a little thing, it's your brand. I suppose the irony is obviously we work in this industry and branding, it's all personal, isn't it? What are the steps to consider for 2024?
Okay, so a couple of things. I think when we've been talking about this from, as I said, the PRCA kind of mental health group that I'm involved in, one of the things that we have been discussing and we feel is missing is a lot of agencies doing a lot of fantastic things.
Yes.
But sometimes, and I'm like, happily speak from personal experience, when you are in a kind of leadership position, you have to be the one that soaks up everyone's problems. And I think maybe from an industry point of view, there isn't enough that supports leaders in terms of not only giving them advice, which I think is absolutely vital, because as I said, we don't have all the answers. But, you know, I'll be honest, sometimes it's hard to soak up 185 people's problems when, you know, your own personal lives. And I think a lot of the people that we spoke to in-house and agency side felt that those pressures were there, but there wasn't actually an opportunity for them to go, who's checking in with me, you know? And I don't mean that in a selfish way. I think actually from an industry point of view, it's really important when there are different pressures on leaders that there is an opportunity or a, you know, some kind of vehicle that helps from an industry point of view that makes sure that leaders are being looked out for as well.
And just to add to that as well, I think a lot of times in my experience, it's been the senior leaders who are at the forefront, literally, of the battle when all these stresses are coming bounding in arrows into the agency.
Yeah,
and they're the first. They're the ones who
they are.
And they're the ones who have to take it on, add more time, because of course those boundaries, those personal boundaries, get influenced.
And they crash and burn, and then they, you know, they really do. And so I think that's one of the things. I think the other thing I would say, and I don't know whether this is, I think this is already happening in 2023, and we've been doing this for a while, but I think it's something that we need to do more of and look to kind of widen out, is bringing more support into the workplace, but more support in kind of a, as I said, kind of widening that support into other things, into everyday life. So we already provide financial advice and pensions advice, but there are so many small things that actually are the things that cause people the greatest stress that from an agency or from a, you know, work point of view, we can help a bit more on, you know. So, you know, I mean, I was talking to someone recently, you know, setting up their first mortgage, right? Some people don't want to go to their parents to ask them how to do that. And if you've ever, you know, done your first mortgage, it's very, very stressful, and it can cause people, you know, it could be a tax form. I mean, I remember the first time I had to, it is, you know, it generally, I don't like to be a person who finds that he can't do something or doesn't know how to do something. So, you know, and you kind of just capitulate if you can't. So I think the more that we can bring in to help people, as I said, I think a lot of the drivers are sometimes things outside of work. I'm not saying, I think work can be a driver, absolutely, and can accentuate things. But what else can we bring from to make the outside life easier? And that's not, you know, in a, you know, I know that there are a lot of big American companies that want to do everything inside so they can keep it. I don't mean it like that. I mean, how can we do things that just allow people to get the support that they may not? Some people don't have, you know, family they can go to and say, how do I set up a mortgage, mum or dad? Or don't want to. So what is it that we can do to just take away some of these other stresses?
What if you could give one piece of advice for people to take away? What would it be?
I would say don't be naive to it. I think, you know, we all have, you know, ups and downs, physically and mentally. And I think, you know, at some point in life, unfortunately, you will have a point in your life where your mental, you know, health may drop significantly, may not drop that, you know, who knows? But I think don't be naive to it now. And again, I will speak personally. I'm sure when I was younger, I felt I was, you know, bulletproof. I'm going to be resilient and alpha and, you know, all of these things. And, I'll go to a mental health talk, but, you know, kind of whatever, you know, I'll be all right. You know, it's just not true. It happens out of the blue. And I have friends and family and colleagues where, you know, you would say, oh, that person never, it's just part, you know, it is part of life. Soak up everything you can and just have it there, you know, and be prepared. Hopefully, you know, it won't, but I think we're not bulletproof, and no one's expected to be bulletproof. So yeah, just I would lean into it.
No, I like that. You know, don't be naive. I think it's relatively new sector, isn't it? I mean, as in the piano,
absolutely
better than everybody else.
Yeah, absolutely. And look, the industry that we work in, sorry, is really stressful. Clients demand a lot. Pitches are turned around super fast. There's pressure. And you've no idea how much of that you can soak up until you can't.
Well, that is a lovely sort of point. And I think we'll end now. Just want to say a big thank you to Jonathan Curtis.
Thanks very much. Absolute pleasure.